We're just waiting for all of the attendees to join.
Yep. We're up to 17 and continuing to grow. It looks like it's stalled out at 18, but perhaps in a few minutes as it goes on, we'll add some more. So with that, I think, Christina, I'll go ahead and open it up. And with that, just welcome everybody to this special session for the Montoursville area Board of School Directors, and this presentation on options for an elementary project. And with that, really, I'll pass it off to our superintendent, and she has some words to add to this.
Well, thank you for joining us again this evening. I do have a statement that I would just like to read to you because it provides the background as to why we're here now. In 2014, the board determined that they should engage in having a feasibility study address the aging buildings within the district. The results of that study were that the two buildings at that time in most need were the high school and Loyalsock Valley Elementary. The board agreed to complete one of those projects and wait on the other. The high school project was completed in 2017. However, to ensure that the Loyalsock Valley Elementary School remained eligible for state funding when and if a project was to be sought, the board at that time moved forward with the establishment of a Plan Con A. And Plan Con is the process that you have to go through in order for your project to be approved for state funding, and A is obviously the first step. It's like a place marker on the books of the state to earmark state funds for any project that a school uses to follow those guidelines, and they have to follow the guidelines of a feasibility study at that time as well. 6 years have passed, and that Plan Con A place marker is coming to an end. I received very early last year from the state that we needed to either move forward on a project by July of 2021 or forego the state funding. The study done in 2014 is now out of date as well by state standards, and any continuation with the current Plan Con would require a new feasibility study. When these facts were shared with me, I brought them to the attention of the full board so they could plan appropriately. Crabtree Rohrbaugh was the established architect of record on the Plan Con A documents for the Loyalsock Valley Elementary School. Understanding that Crabtree was the name in such being the architect of record, the present board established that they wished for this company to begin the process of working through a new feasibility study. The results of their research on building deficiencies resulted in 2 public meetings that we held in June, last month, June of 2020, and 2 scheduled meetings on possible options for the board's consideration. That does not mean that there won't be more meetings. It just means that to present the original options, it will be tonight as well as the 22nd, next Wednesday. Therefore, what you heard in the first 2 public meetings, as well as what you will hear tonight and again on the 22nd, will address all of the district buildings, not just the Loyalsock Valley, because feasibility studies cannot look at one building. They must look at the district as a whole. They cannot look at them piecemealing them, as they call it. The meetings held in June summarized the first phase of this process. During these meetings, identical content was shared about the buildings within the district. It included factual information about the statistics of the district, such as current enrollment and potential for future enrollment projections, current educational capacities within each building, and how they are utilized. The architects also shared factual information about the current building deficiencies, including code deficiencies. The virtual meetings had over 26 participants for the first meeting and over 50 participants for the second meeting. More than 15 questions were asked by those participants. It really is important for the members of the public to understand these deficiencies, as they have become the basis for the options that will be presented this evening. In order to understand all of the facts and how we got to this point, you will want to invest time in reviewing either both of the June videos or one of those June videos, as the content, like I said, is the same. And they are found on our YouTube channel. And if you go to our website, that would be the very upper right-hand corner. You'll see YouTube, and you can click into there. I really want to be very clear that we want to hear from you. As community members, you have the opportunity to attend any and all public sessions regarding study discussions. We've advertised these meetings in the Web Weekly, on our website, on Facebook, and have sent out a postcard invitation to all residents of our district so that they were aware that we are asking for their input. And again, these sessions are always recorded and posted on that YouTube channel for you. How the board moves forward with the study and the investment in education is a community decision. We're trying to use every public method available to reach out to our residents for their input to ensure that what the board determines is in the best interest of the community and our students. It is your responsibility as community members to educate yourself on this process so you know the facts, and you can help us make informed decisions as we all move forward through this process together. This evening, we will hear the presentation from the architects first, then we will have public question and answer time. We really appreciate you being here. We know that your time is valuable, and we appreciate the attention and knowing that this is the future of our district. So with that, I will turn it over to Scott Cousins from Crabtree Rohrbaugh.
Thank you, Ms. Basin. I'm going to start the PowerPoint. As Ms. Basin mentioned, we have been at the study for quite some time, and the last phase was spent developing kind of analysis of the existing need. And a little bit different from the previous study, as we started documenting the need, we're realizing that Leiter Elementary School is also coming up on an outdated renovation and in need of some infrastructure improvements. So the options you're going to see, I'm going to present, address needs at both the schools, and it looks at what the ways the district can evolve or change to address the needs of both those schools and possibly change grade configuration or grade alignment. So we developed 7 options. I'll do a quick summary of those options, and then I'll go into more detail in each one of those options. The first 2 options were grounded in the previous study, so they were options that were variations. These are options that are variations that were around in 2014, and they involve additions and renovations to Loyal-Sauk Valley. A little bit different this time around. You'll see that we're also including costs to do upgrades at Leiter Elementary School to address some of the needs there. The only difference between options 1 and 2 are the size of the additions at Loyal-Sauk Valley. Option 3 is an option that looks at consolidating all K-4 students into one building. Leiter being the larger of the 2 buildings and the more recently renovated makes the most sense to do that. So this option looks at consolidating grades K-4 at Leiter, closing Loyal-Sauk Valley Elementary School, and maintaining the existing K-4 grade configuration. Options 4 and 5 looks at modifying the grade configuration and moving grades 3 and 4 to McCall Middle School and creating a 3 to 5 intermediate school there. And then, but depending on which option, 4 or 5, it would convert one of the existing elementary schools to a K-2 primary school. Option 6 looks at that same grade realignment, a similar grade realignment of going to a 3 to 4 intermediate school and a K-2 primary school, but utilizing your 2 existing elementary schools to achieve that grade realignment. And then option 7 looks at constructing a new centralized elementary school for grades K-4 on the McCall Middle School site and closing Loyal-Sauk Valley and Leiter Elementary School. So moving into option 1, what you'll see with each option is we'll give a brief overview of the configuration of the spaces. We're not going to show floor plans in this presentation. They have been omitted just for security purposes in today's day and age. And then also more detailed PDF of this, similar to the last presentations, the PDF will be posted to the district website, which will have all this information along with it. So as mentioned, option one is comprehensive renovations and minor additions to the Loyalsock Valley Elementary School. And whenever we talk about comprehensive renovations, that's really addressing every deficiency and every need within the existing building. That not only talks about the existing infrastructure, but also looks at addressing the majority of the educational and functional deficiencies as well. And then doing mechanical, electrical, plumbing system upgrades to Leiter Elementary School. That is one of the major deficiencies for those of you who participated in the previous two meetings. At Leiter Elementary School, those systems are reaching the end of their useful life. And one of the goals from the onset of the study was to provide air conditioning for all elementary students. And then once again, it maintains the current grade configuration. So I'll turn it over to Sean, and he'll walk you through the arrangement of spaces.
Thank you, Scott. So looking at option one, as Scott previously mentioned, this is a comprehensive renovation to Loyalsock Valley Elementary School with some minor additions. But as far as the standard classrooms go, we'd be maintaining the existing count of classrooms at Loyalsock Valley, as well as the mechanical, electrical, plumbing upgrades to Leiter Elementary School. So the existing capacities would be maintained at both buildings. So functional building capacity of 293 students and 518 students respectively between each building, and a total of 34 standard classrooms. Looking at the kind of site plan for option one, you can see that we're doing a minor addition to provide a secure entrance vestibule for meeting security standards for today, as well as some minor administration office additions and a new nurse's office that will alleviate some of the strains that are in those areas currently. This option would also include some site work to better organize the parent and bus drop-off areas and a minor expansion of the hard surface play area to the south of the building.
Okay. I'll go through kind of a detailed explanation of the cost of each one of these options, and then of how we get to our numbers, and then we'll kind of do a high-level overview of each of the options going forward. You'll see here each of the schools noted in the cost associated with each school. Up at the top, you'll see square footage renovation costs and the cost associated with the renovations. Next, you'll see square footage of additions and the cost associated with that. And then a line item for construction, site construction costs. And then escalation and contingency that's applied to that. That'll account for any increase in construction costs over the years and any contingency that of changes in design once we get into design. The study is meant to be kind of a high level, kind of bird's eye view. So with any project, as you move forward with it, it could ebb and flow with when you get into the details. So we apply some contingency there. So you get a subtotal of the construction costs. So this is what you would expect to be on bid day when you go out for public bid for any project. And then we have a line item for construction soft costs. This covers contingency for any unforeseen issues that arise during construction, testing and inspection, regulatory agency fees, and other construction related costs that aren't part of the bid project. Then we have a total construction cost, and then we have project soft costs. That includes things like furniture, fixtures, and equipment, financing fees, design fees, technology equipment, and other project-related soft costs. So we always like to show not just what it's going to cost to construct the building, but what it means in a total project cost, an all-in cost, so to speak. So with option one, the minor additions to Loyalsock Valley and comprehensive renovations, it's an $8.7 to $9.6 million cost. At Leiter Elementary School, you can see here, these are the mechanical, electrical, plumbing upgrades. So you'll just see a line item here just for those renovation costs, no additions, no site work. And then total project cost there of 5.6 to 6.1. So a total option one cost of $4.3 to $15.8 million. So one of the requirements that Pennsylvania Department of Education requires in a study is to do an analysis of the positives and negatives of all the options, so we can bring them to the forefront for the school board to make their decision. So you'll see a list of pros here. This is one of the lower construction costs that you'll see as we move through the options, and it does maintain all your neighborhood schools. Some of the cons is, we mentioned before that this was a minor addition. For those of you who were present during our existing condition analysis, there was some other educational and functional needs that were noted at Loyalsock Valley, consisting of undersized kitchen, a shared cafeteria gym that's really not a gym because it's a standard height ceiling. So those needs weren't addressed in this. You'll see as we move into option 2 that option really serves to address those additional needs. And it doesn't address all the existing facility conditions or educational functional deficiencies at Leiter. Once again, that is just a mechanical, electrical, plumbing upgrade. You'll see as we go into other options, we do look at, when we get more in depth at Leiter, addressing all those needs. But the focus here is Loyalsock for this option. And then 2 items at the bottom you'll see as a common theme, whether they end up as pros or cons. Whenever you have elementary student split amongst different buildings, there is an equity issue involved. So there is a lack of equity once you split those students, and shared resources. So whenever you have a centralized grade grouping, you have the ability to share resources, whether it be special education or specials or any other support services. And then it's not as operationally efficient as some other options. You'll see, as you know, down the road, we're going to look at some options that close some school buildings, and when you do that, you become more efficient as a district on the operations side. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Brandy, and she's going to talk about some of the financing side and operational savings side of things.
Okay, I'm going to start with saying that these slides that I present for each option are high estimate on the cost that the taxpayers will incur in a tax increase. I used millage rate studies provided by RBC Capital Markets, and I've been working with them to get a couple of estimates. So these are estimates. These borrowings are not fit to each project. So as the board decides, we will then start, as they decide, narrow it down to a couple options, we will start working closer with RBC markets and get them closer to what the district needs to borrow. So for an example here is this borrowing that we're looking at here is 15 million and up to $1 million from our capital account. We could say this is the option we want to go with, and we could borrow 14 million and take 2 million. This could be different scenarios, but I just want to let everyone know these are just some options that we have that are generic that we could use for all the projects listed here. As we narrow it down, we'll get a closer look at what the options could be. So to start with this one, there are no savings with this option for the building project itself. The estimated tax increase needed to support this project with borrowing 15 million and taking up to $1 million from the capital would have us increase taxes over a 5-year period. When you're planning for a project, you usually build your millage rate over a 5-year period to get up to the millage rate you need for that bond payment. So in 2022, we would need to increase taxes 0.14 mils. In 2023 through 2026, we would need to increase taxes 0.15 mils. So the total increase for just this project would be 0.74 mils. This is in addition to any increases that are needed for the general operations of the budget. So again, this would be just for that building project.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to option 2, as I mentioned prior, this is very similar to option 1. The only difference is the additions are now increased to address all the educational and functional deficiencies at Loyalsock Valley.
So with option 2, again, we're maintaining the existing classroom configurations for both Loyalsock Valley and Leiter Elementary School, giving you the total of 34 classroom spaces and maintaining the existing functional capacity of 833 students. Where you see the difference in option 2 is, as you can see in this slide, the expansion area for Loyalsock Valley is more significant, where we add in a gymnasium, upgrading with a new kitchen, and a more significant addition for administration, secure vestibule, nurse's office, and we include conference rooms and so forth. Meanwhile, the rest of the building maintains about the same as you saw in option 1 with the maintaining the classroom configuration. Site work is similar to option 1, but a little bit more extensive because we are building out into the existing parking lot area on the north side of the building, but otherwise we would propose doing similar bus drop-off, parent drop-off areas in the front of the building, as well as an expanded hard surface play area.
Yeah, and one of the things that you don't get to see because you don't see the full floor plan, there is some reconfiguration of spaces within the existing building to meet the needs, such as sensory rooms and additional counselor space and spaces that were identified as deficiencies in the study. Those are in the existing building. So looking at the cost, you'll see very similar to option 1, except for now with the additions at Loyalsock, they're 12,500 square feet, which increases the cost. So you get a total project cost range of $18.1 to $19.9 million. And once again, all this information is in the PDF study that will be posted to the district website. So option 2, now with the pros, we get to meet all the educational functional needs at Loyalsock Valley Elementary School. Once again, it maintains all existing neighborhood schools. The cons, we're still at Leiter, not addressing all the deficiencies there. And once again, it's not as operationally efficient as other options, and it lacks the equity and shared resources among grade levels. Randy.
All right. This option, there is no savings for this one. The estimating borrowing would be $20 million. And to get to the millage rate over 5 years, we would have to increase in 2022 through 2024 0.20 mils. And in 2025 and 2026, we would need to increase 0.19 mils each year for a total of 0.98 mils. And again, this is in addition to any increases that are needed for the general operating budget.
Okay. Moving on to option 3, this was an option to look at what the scenario would be if you look to consolidate all your K-4 elementary students in one building. As I mentioned before, the building made most sense from a size standpoint was Leiter Elementary School, and it has been renovated and added on to more recently. So this would involve comprehensive renovations to Leiter along with additions to accommodate those additional students. And once again, it would maintain the K-4 grade configuration.
With this option, with all of your K-4 classrooms being consolidated into one building, the school district can take advantage of some efficiencies that are gained, reducing the total number of standard classrooms from 34, which were split between both buildings, to 32, which will be consolidated at Leiter Elementary School. So that will give you a functional building capacity of 720 students.
And for those of you who were present before you, when we talked about enrollment and projected enrollment, it's either flat to declining at the current moment, looking into the foreseeable future based on past enrollment projections and PDE projections. So you'll see there that 1920 enrollment of 685 is still well below the functional building capacity of 720, even by eliminating those 2 classrooms.
What this option looks like on site is you can see the existing building footprint in blue with the expansions shown in yellow. There's a significant expansion area kind of sandwiched between both wings of the building. That would include 7 general classrooms as well as STEM classrooms, some special education program, SGI, and support space. There's another smaller addition toward Elm Street, which would include additional kindergarten classrooms and an SGI. One of the talking points that we've had with the administration to date is with a consolidated program at Leiter Elementary School, there would be some additional traffic in the area with all the additional students coming. To help address that, we would take the area that's currently occupied by a small parking lot and a softball field and make a bus loop and reconfigure parking area along the Elm Street side of the building. We would also propose some minor adjustments to the drive coming in off of Walnut Street to be used for parent drop-off and then discharging onto Spruce Street to help alleviate some traffic concerns. We would also do some adjustments to the play area sandwiched between the wings of the building. Because we're doing the addition in that area, we would have to do some modifications to the layouts. So we would do a mix of hard surface and soft surface play areas within the courtyard of the building.
The cost of this, of course, we're not looking at just one building now. So as I mentioned before, we're looking at when we're doing more work at Leiter, doing a full makes sense to do a full comprehensive renovation at that time. So 70,270 square feet of existing building at a full comprehensive renovation. There's a cost, you'll see there, 4.9 to 5.4. And you'll see additions of 21,400 square feet as Sean described them. And that gets you to a total project cost of $15 to $16.5 million. So going through the pros and cons for this option, this is the lowest construction cost of all the options we looked at. You get the equity and shared resources among grade levels by combining them all in one building. Consolidates the district to 3 buildings, creating operational savings, and Brandy will go through those in a second. Some of the cons, as Sean mentioned, you'll have a larger number of students on a condensed site, so that is a concern that will need to be addressed. There's going to be an increase in transportation time for some elementary students. Those will be the elementary students that normally would go to Loyalsock Valley would now be traveling to Leiter. And then you'll have the loss of one neighborhood school.
All right. This option, we see some savings here. The personnel is the largest piece of this. I will start with saying that these savings are they are being representative at the low end. So I think there's potential for more savings and other options, but we wanted to be very conservative with it and present you with the highest cost that it could be to the taxpayers. So with the personnel, we see an estimated savings of $290,000. This would take place through retirements, with being able to have all of each grade in each building. We often see times when, one grouping at one building has high numbers and one grouping at another building has low numbers. Doing this, it would be able to even out all the classrooms, and we could see some personnel savings with professional staff, support staff, custodial maintenance, staffing across the board. So low estimate on that was $290,000. We also looked at the maintenance and utilities that we could save at Loyalsock Valley. Now, not knowing what we will be doing with Loyalsock Valley, so in this planning for the savings, I have looked at it as we will be keeping the building and maintaining it. So we will have some costs associated with it. And we looked at what our savings would be with having the building still there and just not have to be around 110,000. So overall, the estimate savings on this project annually is 400,000. So with looking at the borrowing study, the millage rate study that we used for this, it's a 15 million with a $300,000 savings. So this is only representing the millage rate with a 300,000 savings. So if the board decides to move forward with this project, these millage rates would obviously change a little bit because we are anticipating a higher savings. And this also shows us using $2 million from capital. So with that, we would need to increase taxes over the next 5 years. 2022 through 2025 would be 0.07 mils, and 2026 would be 0.08 mils, and that is with figuring in the $300,000 in savings. So it would be a total of 0.36 mils, but this is in addition to any increase needed for the general operating budget, just as in all the other projects.
Okay, thank you, Brandy. Okay, moving on to option 4. So option 4 and 5, you're going to see are very similar. They involve relocating grades 3 to 4 to McCall Middle School and constructing an addition to accommodate that, and incorporating 5th grade with that addition, with that grade grouping, and you'll see kind of that and how that looks on the site plan. It involves comprehensive renovations to Leiter Elementary School to convert it to a K-2 primary school. So you'll see in the next option, we'll look at what it takes to convert Loyalsock to that K-2, but in this option, we're focusing on Leiter, and then Loyalsock Valley Elementary School would also close in this option.
So with this option, we would be maintaining the existing classroom configuration at Leiter Elementary School, which is 22 standard classrooms, while adding 12 standard classrooms at the addition to McCall Middle School. So you would have a functional building capacity equal to what you have currently at Leiter Elementary of 495, and a functional building capacity for the addition at McCall Middle School of 270 students.
Yeah, so essentially the existing building at Leiter is able to accommodate grades, district-wide grades K-2 without an addition. So you won't see a site plan for that, but it's able to be reconfigured internally without any additions.
Right. So what we are proposing at McCall Middle School is an addition that would be a 2-story addition off of one side of the school that favors the 5th grade classroom area, so that the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade classroom areas would all be close together and share the same resources that are brought on board with the addition. So we would include a new separate secure entrance for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. General classrooms, there would be 12 of them between the 2 floors, as well as STEM, music, and art classrooms that would be used by 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. We'd also bring on board a separate cafeteria with a minor kitchen addition that the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders can use, as well as the own administration and nurse areas and support spaces. So the concept is really to have a school within a school at McCall, so that the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders have their own facilities and program spaces, and they could remain largely separate from the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Some program areas, such as the library and gymnasium spaces, would remain to be shared between all of the grades. On the site, we would do some site upgrades to provide that separate parent drop-off area along the administration side, and then an extension of the bus drop-off area so that buses could drop off once for 6th, 7th, 8th, and then go to the loop for 3rd, and 4th, and 5th graders and we would be maintaining the other facilities on site nearby next to the tennis courts, and also some play areas on site next to the tennis courts for 3rd, 4th, 5th grade.
Okay. So in this option at CE McCall, obviously the major cost there would be the additions for grades 3 to 4. There would be some minor renovation costs just where the building interfaces. We wouldn't propose any other additional upgrades or renovations at McCall. This would just be where the construction interfaces with the existing building. And as Sean mentioned, some site costs as well. So a total project cost for McCall to add grades 3 to 4 at 14.9 to 16.4. And then Leiter, converting that to a K to 2. This cost now is once again a comprehensive renovation. This is slightly more than what you saw in the previous option because it involves some addition of toilet rooms to kindergarten classrooms when you expand the kindergarten areas. So you get a total project cost of $7 to $7.7 million for Leiter, or a total combined option 4 costs of $22 to $24.2 million. Going through the pros and cons, this grade grouping aligns with the educational program and goals of the district. So I mentioned before that the K to 2 is kind of that primary grade grouping level. And when you look at the district's educational program, and most districts throughout the state's educational program, it's a common grouping to have grades K through 2 together, and then also grades 3 through 5 together. So this really aligns with that educational program and the goals and the education put forth for those grade groupings. It also incorporates 5th grade into that elementary grade grouping. So right now, 5th grade's a little kind of off on their own as far as how they operate within the middle school. They're still considered an elementary grade level and operate on a different schedule, different curriculum. So this kind of gets them back to an elementary setting with grades 3 to 4. Once again, equity and shared resources among grade levels. You don't have any students that are in the same grade split between buildings. And it consolidates the district to 3 buildings with creating the operational savings. Some of the cons, 3rd and 4th grades located at the middle school. Although it is with a school within a school, you'll still have some interaction with the 7th and 8th graders, going back and forth between the gym and the library. There's once again increase in transportation time for the Loyal-Sauk Valley Elementary students, and you once again lose 1 neighborhood school in this option.
All right, for savings for this option, we have personnel at 240,000, and the maintenance and utilities we left at 110,000. So the savings would be around 350,000 annually. The estimated tax increase to support this project would be coming from borrowing 20 million and using approximately 200,000 with 200,000 and using 4.2 million from capital. So again, our estimated savings are significant compared to what this borrowing study is using. But for this 20 million with $200,000 savings in 2022, 2023, we're going to look at a 0.14 mils increase for the project, and in 2024 to 2026, we'll be looking at 0.15 mils increase for the project, taking us to a total of 0.73 mils for the project. This is in addition to any increases that are needed for the general operation of the budget.
So option 5 is very similar to option 4. The only variation is rather than consolidating grades K to 2 at Leiter Elementary School, this option looks like consolidating grades K to 2 at Loyal-Sauk Valley Elementary School and closing Leiter Elementary School. And you'll see that this will involve very similar addition scenario to option 2. I'll let Sean go through that.
Scott, as you mentioned, the impact on McCall Middle School is exactly the same as option 4. The difference here is having the K through 2 program at Loyal-Sauk Valley. That being the smaller of the two elementary schools, it would need to undergo a little bit more of a significant addition to accommodate the additional classrooms necessary to fit all the students. So there would be a total of 22 classrooms at Loyalsock Valley Elementary School. So we would be doing a similar addition for the gymnasium, secure vestibule, administration, nurse, et cetera, as well as an addition on the south side of the building that would bring the additional classrooms, STEM classrooms, some SGI and support space that are necessary to accommodate the K-2 programs. And again, we would be doing similar site work as you saw in previous options for Loyalsock Valley.
Yeah, so as Sean mentioned, this addition you see here in option 5 is the same addition on the left-hand side of the screen here is the same addition represented in option 2. It's just now we have the additional classrooms because the K-2 population would need the additional space. So same cost for McCall at the 14.9 to 16.4. At Loyalsock Valley, we now have larger additions, 27,500. So the costs there go up from option 2. So you get an 18 million to 19.8 million, or a total project cost of 32.9 to 36.2 million. And looking at the pros and cons, the grade grouping once again aligns with the program goals and incorporates 5th grade into the appropriate grade elementary grade settings. You have the equity and shared resources among grade levels, and you have the consolidation of District 3 buildings, creating the operational savings. The cons is, once again, 3rd and 4th grades located at the middle school, increased transportation time for some elementary school students. In this case, it would be increased transportation time for the lighter students, and loss of one neighborhood school. And I think off the screen here, one of the other cons is this is the most expensive option, and you'll see as Brandy will explain that it goes beyond the borrowing capacity of the district.
At the time, the district does not have the borrowing capacity for this project, so it's not something that we will be able to finance at this point.
I think it's important to note that as part of any option analysis or any development of options, it's important to look at everything out there that's available. And then even if it's ends up not being feasible, I think the district wants to make sure that everyone's aware that they did look at these options. So option 6 looks to do a similar grade realignment of the primary school at K-2 and the intermediate school of 3 to 4 in this case, and that looks to utilize your 2 existing elementary schools. So once again, lighter is the larger elementary school and better suited to accommodate the 3 grade level population of the K-2. So making lighter the K-2 primary school, doing comprehensive renovations there. Once again, that grade alignment does fit in with the building without any additions. And then converting Loyalsock Valley Elementary School to the 3 to 4 intermediate school. And that would also undergo comprehensive renovations and additions very similar to option 2 to accommodate the additional educational and functional deficiencies of the gymnasium and things like that.
So with this option, we would be maintaining the number of classrooms that are currently located at each elementary school. Loyalsock would get the comprehensive renovations and the additions to accommodate the gymnasium, secure vestibule administration, and so forth. But grades 3 through 4 will be located within the existing classroom configuration. Whereas at lighter elementary school, grades K through 2 will be similar to option 4. There would be some renovations required for toilet rooms and so forth for the kindergarten program.
Yeah, so essentially the costs combined two separate options. Loyalsock Valley, same cost as option 2 for the 12.5 to 13.7, and then lighter, the same cost as option 4 is the 7 to 7.7 million. So total option 6 costs of 19.6 to 21.5 million. So some of the pros and cons. The pros, the grade groupings align with the educational program and goals of the district, once again being the K-2 and 3 to 4 grade groupings. You have the equity and shared resources among grade levels because all students at any one grade level in the same building. It maintains both neighborhood schools. Some of the cons is increased transportation time for all elementary school students in this scenario. So both Lowestoft and lighter students would experience the increased transportation time because they'd be going to either one of their buildings, depending on what grade level they're at. And there would be an increased building transition for the elementary students as a con. So now we're looking at 4 building transitions where, in your current scenario and any of the other options we looked at, there were 3 transitions. So any one student through their career at through their schooling at Montoursville would now be going to four buildings in this scenario. And that leads to the last con here, which is transportation could be difficult for parents with multiple students within the district, depending on this on the students where they would be located, how old they would be. They could be traveling up to 2 or 3 buildings at any day.
All right. Here we see personnel savings of 220,000. This is due to the realignment of the grades. The estimated tax increase needed to support this project, including the savings, would be borrowing 20 million with a $200,000 savings and using approximately 1.4 million from the capital. With doing that in 2022, 2023, we would need to increase 0.14 mils each year. And in 2024 through 2026, we would need to increase 0.15 mils each year for a total increase for this project of 0.73 mils. This is in addition to any increases that we may need for general operations.
Okay. Last, we'll look at the final option. This was actually an option that was brought up as a thought at one of the early public meetings as a public comment of looking at building a new school and consolidating both elementary schools there. So this looks at doing that on the McCall Middle School site. This could be built on another site, however, that's not owned by the district, but for this option, we chose McCall Middle School as a landing spot for it. And then, of course, it would close Loyalsock Valley and lighter elementary schools.
With this option, we would consolidate all of the K-4 program into a single building. Working with the administration, we've established that the number of classrooms, standard classrooms ideally would be set at 32, along with your other educational program and support spaces. Functional building capacity would be set at 720 students compared to your current 1920 enrollment of 685. So as an example of what this new building could look like, this takes the soccer field area that's sandwiched between the baseball and softball fields next door to McCall Middle School and places a 2-story building that is composed of 3 classroom wings, 2 of which are 2-story to accommodate your first, second, third, and fourth grade classrooms. And then the 3rd classroom wing would only be 1-story. That would accommodate the kindergarten classroom program. So those classrooms are a little bit bigger. It would have a slightly different footprint. Of course, it would also bring on board your standard amenities, including gymnasium, cafeteria, your special programs, including art, music, and STEM classrooms, and your administration media center spaces as well. Example of what we would do on site includes, as you've seen on other options, separating the bus and parent drop-offs with different loops, your parking scattered throughout the site, and your service drive would be to the one side of the building, to the service side.
Okay, and once again, looking at just one building in the construction cost scenario. So that new building was approximately 98,500 square feet to house district-wide K-4. Associated site work and contingencies bring the construction cost or total project cost to 28.7 to 31.6 million. Some of the pros, this does eliminate the infrastructure of your older schools, although some of the other options look at comprehensive renovations that would bring the majority of the systems and components up to current standards. You would still be left with outdated, older structures of those buildings that would need maintained over the years. So this option does eliminate those older infrastructures. You have, once again, the equity and shared resources among grade levels, and it consolidates the district to 3 buildings, creating operational savings. Some of the cons, it is one of the higher construction cost options. There is an increase in transportation time, once again, for some of the elementary school students. Now you have loss of 2 neighborhood schools, and it eliminates the soccer fields on the middle school, so a solution would need to be held for that as far as how they get addressed.
For this one, you'll see the personnel savings at 290,000, and we left the maintenance and utilities at 110,000 because we know at least that's the savings at one building with closing another building, but we're going to be creating a new building and not knowing the utility costs for that new building. We didn't factor in any additional maintenance and utility savings at this point. The estimated tax increase to support the project would be borrowing $25 million with $400,000 savings and taking $5 million from capital. This would take everything that we have from capital. We would see a needed increase in 2022 through 2024 of 0.14 mils, and in 25-26 we would see the needed increase of 0.15 mils. This would total our millage for this project at 0.72 mils. This is in addition to any increases needed for the general operating budget.
Okay. So in summary, you're going to see some slides that are more meant for reference after the meeting. It's going to summarize all the options and all the components. Certainly, I'm not going to read through this or expect anybody to look at it, but it just gives a good summary as a way after the fact to look back and compare these options, whether it be the cost or the grade alignment or what if a building's closing or not, some of the square footages, things like that. So there's 2 slides of summaries of options, of all the options, and then I'll let Brandy close out with a summary of the financials.
You go one more slide. Thank you. The estimated financial summary here, and again, I will reiterate, these were millage studies that were done generic. These are not fit for these projects, so we may borrow. Well, if we do go forward with one of these projects, the borrowing would probably be different and the use of capital would be different, but these are to give you an estimate of what the tax increase would look like moving forward with one of these projects. So you'll see here in the summary, each option is listed with the amount that would be borrowed, the example used for the capital being used, and what the tax increase would be, and what the annual impact would be on the average assessed property, and when it extends the debt out through. And the extension of the debt is something that's important because some of these options you will see only extend the debt an additional 5 years, and some of them extend it all the way out an additional 7 years, as in option 7 does extend it out an additional 7 years, and that is even with the millage rate at 0.72 mils. So it's important to remember how much longer the debt goes with that.
Okay, and so that concludes our presentation. I'm going to turn it back over to Christina for any closing remarks, and then we can open it up for any comments.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Sean. We appreciate the efforts that you've put forth. I wanted to share with everyone that the board did get to see this material. I sent it to them on July the 8th, And then they did get to see this presentation last night so that they had some ideas about what you were going to see. And if they wish to participate in the questions and answers time, they had the opportunity of doing that. So we will open it up. At this time, there is a process for you, and you can raise your hands, and I will let Sebastian Piper help you with understanding how to complete that process to ask your questions.
Okay, for those of you in the public, if you would like to speak, there is an icon on your screen that looks like a hand. Go ahead and click that, and we will be able to tell that you are raising your hand and would like to speak, at which time we will go down the list alphabetically and allow you to do so. We will provide you with 3 minutes to speak, and we just ask that you please state your full name and your address before speaking.
Sebastian, while we're waiting for hands to be raised, I think how I'd like to see this play out would be that the public can both make comment, and if that's all they have is comments, that's fine. And then also ask questions, and if we can engage with the question and the answer on some level with the architects, that would be great too. That's what we did with the feasibility study. And then once the public has, I guess, offered their thoughts, had their questions answered, then let's, at the board level, then if there's any discussion we'd like to have at the board level, that discussion could also prompt some additional questions or comments, from the public, and then we'll sort of have I guess a back and forth, I suppose. So I'd like to proceed that way if we could.
Okay, so I'm seeing some hand raised. So I will start going down the list now and allow them to speak.
Hello, this is Daniel Acello at 999 Weldon Street. Couple of things quick. I'm curious as to the impact on busing fees if we have both elementaries running with K-2 at one and 3 to 5 a different one, or 3 and 4 at a different one. At the same time, if you could put up that summary of options, and then if someone could really quickly just say option 1 is getting rid of this building and building onto this building. If you could put that up and just throw out that verbal summary again, that would be great.
While he's doing that,
Go ahead.
I can address the transportation if that's okay. So with the transportation, our buses already go by or stop at each of the schools. So what it will end up doing is it may add a half a mile or a mile to a couple of routes, which is very insignificant. But what it does do is it increases our loaded miles, and we would see a little bit more reimbursement. But again, it's not significant because our mileage in total is not changing very much, if at all. So the transportation costs remain pretty much constant.
Okay, I'll give you, go ahead.
If you were not then busing all K-2 to Loyalsock Valley, and you would have to pick up everybody in town that would fall within the K-2 range. Does that, that's all figured into what you were thinking, correct?
Correct, because the stops would be at the buildings.
So our students then, say if I had a kindergartner who needed to go out to Loyalsock Valley, they would go to Leiter for pickup and then go to Loyalsock Valley?
We would be able to pick up at whichever building is closest to you.
Gotcha.
We don't pick up all students at their homes. We have stops that our students walk to.
Okay. And then, so what I was looking for is that last summary sheet that you had up there.
The one with the financial statement?
Yeah, there we go. Excellent. Perfect.
Yeah, and I think, go ahead.
I just wanted to, if you could give me the quick rundown
Sure.
on options 1 through 4, real quick, as I'm looking at this.
Yeah.
Really
And I
quick.
think what's important to note on this financial and millage study is that what Brandy did was do a variety of options for the board to consider. So if you notice that the capital being used is different amongst all these options, that was just to look at the different scenarios. So certainly could option 2 use more capital and lower the millage impact, certainly. But I think she wanted to give a lot of different scenarios so you could see them all. But I'll run through them really quick. Option 1 was the smaller additions to Loyalsock Valley. So that was maintaining both neighborhood schools at K-4, doing comprehensive renovations to Loyalsock Valley, minor additions, and MEP renovations to mechanical, electric, plumbing renovations to Lighter. Option 2 was very similar except for the larger additions at Loyalsock Valley. Option 3 was consolidating all K-4 students at Lighter and closing Loyalsock, doing additions and renovations to Lighter. Option 4 was doing a school within a school addition to McCall Middle School for grades 3 to 5, and doing a converting Lighter to a K-2 and closing Loyalsock. So Lighter would receive the comprehensive renovations. Option 5 was to do the same except for make Loyalsock Valley the K-2 elementary school and do major additions there. And as we mentioned before, that goes beyond the borrowing capacity of the district. Option 6 looks at making Lighter the K-2 building and Loyalsock Valley the 3 to 4 building and doing comprehensive renovations to both and additions to Loyalsock. And then option 7 was the new school construction.
Thank you. If we were to go with moving all elementary into Lighter and doing the big addition in the playground area there, what does that do to class number sizes?
You mean class size as far as
Class size per, no, students per class.
Oh, class size would remain the same. I'm not sure if you're part of our presentation back in the analysis section, but both your elementary schools have much more significant capacity than what you need. You actually have either vacant classrooms or things like of that nature. So if you remember back to that functional capacity, I'll run when we look at.
That's okay. Yes, I do remember that meeting.
Okay. So when we look at the 32 classrooms, the class size would stay the same as relatively as what they are now. And I believe when we look at any capacity of a classroom, we look at PDE standards of 25 students per classroom, but then we back off on that and look at what that utilization rate. So even with that utilization rate at 90%, the capacity in that option was 720 students. Your current enrollment of 1920 is 685. So you can see you still have capacity to be flexible with your class sizes and keep them similar to what they are.
What's the current students per class for K-2? Ms. Basin, do you have that information or someone have that information as far as the current enrollment, not enrollment, but like the class sizes for K-2 compared to what 3 to 5 is?
I do not have that information here, but our principals are on the session with us, and I'm sure that they can give us a rough estimate of what that is.
I would say it's, again, not having the hard numbers in front of me, they're roughly in the 18 to 21 range is where they tend to fluctuate, to be, and they're pretty consistent.
Is that for the whole school building?
Pretty much. Sometimes we get, a few numbers are a little higher in 3rd and 4th, but they pretty much range in 18 to 22. Sometimes we get a class size that went through that would be in the 24, 25, but again, right now, currently, I know I can speak for later. That's what they are you know, 18 to 22, you know, for the most part.
Thank
I
you.
would echo that for the Valley. We have one group right now that's right around 24, 25, but pretty much we ran around 20, 21.
And if you want to get a picture of just the grade as a whole, I can read through the numbers of the 1920 October enrollment for district-wide. Kindergarten, it was 126, first grade 164, second grade 126, third grade 124, fourth grade 145. So you can see just from a entire grade level population. And that's really when we talk about combining grade levels among in one school, some of the efficiencies of being able to, you also are able to balance class sizes a lot better versus having to split between two schools. You can see you had a bubble in first grade of 164 students compared to kindergarten and second grade at 126 each.
Is there flexibility with staffing to address that bubble as they go through, if that makes sense?
Yes, there is always flexibility, and we always try to maintain lower class sizes when possible. And we have been trying to do that long before I got here as well. So we've been pretty successful. However, when you have different school buildings and you see spikes in one or the other, that does cause some inequities among those grades, because you cannot put classes together and consolidate and work together with that teacher or those additional teachers to add that assessment and help for those students. So it does make it a little bit more challenging for us. Substitutes, it makes us very dependent on substitutes, whereas if they were in the same building, one of the efficiencies that we would be able to see and realize is a substitute could be in the building and move to class if we were doing IEP meetings or if there were other meetings that were going on with parents. Right now they are traveling back and forth, so you lose all of that time if we have them moving between the buildings. And that's a loss. You know, you're paying for that, and it's a loss of time.
I think that's my questions for now. I appreciate the time.
And we appreciate the questions. Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Misty.
Good evening, everybody. Ms. Basin, Darren, thank you, Preston, for the presentation. I've got a list of questions here. Some are mine, some are not. What would be best for you guys? Do you want me to just go through the list, or do you want me to ask them individually?
Either way, whatever you feel comfortable doing.
I'm good either way, so we'll just start with the top. When would proposed construction start for all options?
After community input, and a lot of it, and then the board making decisions on what they would like to see. I am sure that just as you've seen these options this evening, and Scott shared that these are the 30,000-foot view, basically. There would be a lot of discussions about what the actual buildings would look like being renovated, and we would get into the weeds on certain projects. Obviously, we're going to try to eliminate certain options early so that we're not spending time on things that we can't afford, obviously, or that would be something that would not fit the educational goals of the district. So having said that, you would only have availability to be starting, I would imagine, as I've been through a lot of projects, it's always a summer schedule usually that is sought after. So you would be headed out to a bidding process sometime around a January timeline. But that does not mean that you rush anything and that you don't obtain input from the public. We want to make sure that this process is understood by everyone and that everyone has had an opportunity to ask their questions. And then the board will start making those decisions and honing in on what it is they feel is in the best interest as far as the investment in education.
So
And
are we
I'll-
thinking 2021, 22?
No one has any dates yet, Misty. That's
Okay.
extremely fluid. There is no one saying you must do this by this time. Now, if we, and we talked about this at the last two meetings, if we wish to use the Plan Con A and strictly do what the Plan Con A instructed us to do or availed us to do for Loyalstock Valley Elementary, then we would need to do that and have contractors chosen by July of 2021. So that is that piece. However, Scott can explain in more detail what the other options are for state funding.
Yeah. And really that kind of keys into the whole timeline of why we're here discussing this now, is to maintain that current Plan Con option for reimbursement. So any project you're looking at here is probably anywhere from a 6 to 10 month design time process. So, you know, obviously there's going to be a time period of consideration by the board as far as what option to proceed with, and refinement of maybe some other options. So there's that time frame which we can't put a time to. But once an option is chosen, depending on the complexity of it, you can expect anywhere from 6 to 10 months of the design, a month or two of bidding, and then going out and then starting construction. As Ms. Basin mentioned, you do want, with any renovation project, you always want to start in that first summer. So that's ideal to get, if we're proceeding on that type of schedule where it's a Plan Con project or not, we want to utilize summer 2021 if possible. In those renovation scenarios, so you have the least impact on the students and do the majority work over the summer. I'll touch a little bit on the other. Go ahead.
Oh, no, thank you. Go ahead and touch away, because if I have the question, I'm sure somebody else does.
I was just gonna basically mention the other Plan Con process. So if the district decides to proceed with an option that is not in the original study, so essentially options 1 and 2 were in the original study, those are options that they can choose to proceed with and get reimbursement under the prior Plan Con. If they proceed with any other option and try to go under the new Plan Con, that'll be subject to whether the state funds the Plan Con within that year, within that fiscal year. So the fiscal budget is typically this time of year over the next couple of months. If there's money in there for Plan Con, you're eligible for reimbursement. If not, then you go forward with the project, then it wouldn't be reimbursed.
Okay. And we won't know that until after everything kind of gets started, correct? I think I remember that from the last meeting.
Yeah, you know, and we always keep a pulse on that. You know, there's always preliminary budgets put out by the state, and we keep an eye on those and see if they do or do not, or if there's any inclination or any pressure from legislators to, you know, revise the budget to include it. Of course, until the final budget comes out from the state, you know, that's when you'll know for sure. But certainly, if we're in a scenario where we're proceeding with any of the other options that weren't in the original study, and we're going out to bid maybe middle of next summer, and we have an idea that maybe the next budget will include the reimbursement, then we're going to make the recommendation to the district to hold off bidding and awarding contracts until that budget is passed, so you can have the eligibility for reimbursement.
Okay. So it says a lot of, on our savings, it was a lot of personnel savings. I think the bare minimum was 290,000. Can we estimate roughly how many positions we would be losing in K-4 district-wide?
I think at this time, we would be looking for things to occur around retirements. There would not be a layoff system, but we would hope through attrition that we would be able to see at this point, using those numbers that Scott spoke of, and as did Mr. Farrar and Dr. Breon, when we heard those numbers, when you're hearing that, you could have 2 teachers who retire and not replace them and still have the same class sizes as what we have currently. Now, that again is simply just the math on the class sizes that we have now. We would always want to consider maintaining low class sizes, and we would not be putting that in jeopardy. So if there was a need to maintain one of those later on, we would. There are other support staff positions too that probably would not need to be maintained. However, you know, there's other pieces that can change, and they again are so fluid. But right now, and Brandy, you can step in here, I believe that it was 2 teachers in retirement. Am I correct on that one, plus others?
2 teachers and 2 support personnel. And that's like all support. It's not just one group of support.
All right, thank you. I know you had asked for some comments, so just looking through the options, as somebody that lives in town, I can tell you as a parent, I really, really don't. And keep in mind, I have a kindergartner, so like I have a kindergartner and a 3rd grader. I will tell you, I don't like the idea of my kindergartner going into 1st grade having to be bussed out to the valley. And that's just simply because we choose to live in town. It's a short distance to school. We like that. So I will say that as a personal comment. Now, looking at the options and the costs and things like that, option 3, and I'm sure everybody's thinking the same thing, looks really good. So a couple of my questions are going to be based on option 3. So on option 3, why the addition between C wing and A wing? Is there a reason that it's back so far to the building instead of closing off the U and making it a square? And then putting the playground in the middle of that so the playground's contained?
That's a very common question we get asked, you know, why do you form courtyards? And courtyards really aren't formed to create courtyards. They're formed to maintain natural light to classrooms. I think any educator and or student would argue that natural light in connection to the exterior, and actually there's been studies that have proven this, improve test scores and improve participation and engagement. So we would never want to put an addition where we close off and make windowless classrooms. So that's why we had it away from the wing.
Yeah, I guess, I'm sorry, I misspoke, Mr. President. I guess my question is, why isn't it being pushed closer towards Elm Street so that the playground's contained? My thought process is
I see what you mean. Yeah.
We just put in the new planters and the barricades to prevent any incidents, but our playground's open to the street.
Yeah, and that's something we did look at. It's tough to explain without seeing the actual floor plan, but once you get further towards the end of the building there, towards the kindergarten wing side, there's really no way to connect back to the existing school. So you have, working our way from the upper street down, you have the service entry, so you can't come across there with a corridor. Then you have the kitchen, the gymnasium, and then you work your way down to the music classroom. So if we were to push it further up, you would then have a very long corridor circulation to get back into the rest of the building. And actually, this is something that the administration talked about as well. The thought was brought up, hey, why don't we, this would be a great secure place for kids to play, but then the item of it being a distraction for the students that have windows onto the classroom, especially at this grade grouping, that they would always be looking outside and being distracted by what's going on by their friends and things like that. So.
I can quite easily see that, and that's certainly something we deal with currently. And on option 3, so I was looking at it up close on the floor plan, and it has 3 new kindergarten rooms listed, but the Valley contains, so at Leiter right now we've got 4 kindergarten rooms, and I believe that the Valley's got 2. So why are we adding a 3rd or an extra kindergarten room from what we already have?
The Valley currently does have 3.
Oh, well, color me surprised. Thank you, Mrs. Brian, or Dr. Brian. I apologize for the error.
No problem.
And all right. Thank you guys for your time. I think that is all I have right now until I go check my email.
And just to focus back on the question about class size with going, when we consolidate, going from the 34 classrooms down to the 32, to put it in perspective, district-wide for K to 4 is 685 students. So if you were to just do the simple math and divide that number amongst your current 34 classrooms, you get about 20 students per classroom. If you were to eliminate those 2 classrooms and go to 32 classrooms, that equals 21 students per classroom. So only additional one. So when we say it's not going to be the exact same number of students per grade, per classroom, but it is pretty much the same number of students per classroom, 20 versus 21, if you are able to divide everything equally.
Okay, so I am seeing another hand. Yeah, Daniel, I'll give you another chance to speak.
That was hard to understand. I have another question, but just to piggyback on what was just said about dividing classrooms equally. I mean, I get trying to even out numbers amongst all grade levels, but at the same time, a kindergarten teacher to have 21 students for kindergarten is a bit high for a teacher to really make the impact that they could have compared to having a class of 18 students for kindergarten. Just 2 or 3 students can really make a world of difference for a teacher, especially at the kindergarten, first grade levels. Once they are at the 3rd and 4th grade levels, yes, attention spans increase, kids can be more attentive, they can focus more. And so the larger classrooms can make sense when you're looking at 20 to 21 students. So I'm not a fan of looking at saying 21 students across all grade levels for a K to 4, because it's not really equitable for student learning to look at it that way. On another note, has there been any studies done or looking into things at what would Loyalsock Valley sell for? Like what monies could be made to supplement the money going out to possibly add on to lighter or whatever other project there might be that would involve Loyalsock Valley being closed?
Would you like me to address this, Ms. Basin?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay, so haven't looked at what it would really sell for, but with this, if we were to sell Loyalsock Valley, if the board was to go ahead and say, yes, we'd like to put it up for sale, and it were to sell, we would have revenue for 1 year on the sale of that. Now, depending on what they determine to do with it once a new buyer purchases it, say the buyer decides to divide it up and build homes. Well, each parcel would then become taxable and we'd receive taxes annually. So we'd receive annual revenue from however that is divided up. If a business was to buy it and put in some sort of business out there, we would also receive tax revenue annually. So we really haven't looked at what it would sell for at this point because we don't even know if that's an option the board is going to consider. Now, if that is the way that they start tracking, we can look further down that way. But no, the income would be primarily a one-time revenue with some additional revenue that comes in annually based on what they do with the property once it's sold.
Thank you. One last question here at the moment. For the options, has there been, and I know with construction timelines can change and whatever seasons and weather and yada, yada, yada. But is there an estimated length of time for like option 3, we'll say, for how long construction would take?
Yeah, so I mentioned before, when you get into any renovation scenario, it's going to be geared around having at least 2 summers. So let's say in a scenario where the district makes a decision, you're able to go out to bid and award bids prior to summer of 2021. You'll have that summer. You can do the additions while the school is occupied, and then come back the following summer and finish up the major renovations. So you're looking at a little over a year process with that, and maybe more depending on how much site work's involved. But probably looking at 12 to 14 months construction timeline.
Thank you. I'm good. Thanks, everyone.
And to clarify that, if that timeline gets started kind of off schedule, meaning like in the middle of the summer or during the school year, that could add to that construction timeline if we want to look to phase it properly and make as little disruption to the students as possible.
Okay, I'm seeing a few more hands. So Patty, you're up next. And Patty, just so you know, you'll have to unmute yourself as well.
There it goes. Sorry. I live out 87 and I'm looking at transportation times for the students living out on the outskirts of town. What would that look like for them? How long of a bus ride would it be? And what is the earliest time that they would be picked up?
Can you give me an area, and I can give you a rough estimate. I don't have the bus routes right here this evening. And
well, I live at 4290, which is right next to Loyalsock Valley, but I'm more concerned of the students that are even farther out than I am.
Okay, so I live at the edge of our borders here. So if you look at students out here, they are approximately on the bus right now for up to about an hour. So I would have to look at, once we revise these bus schedules, at how long the kindergartners or the first graders, but it's about 7-8 more minutes into town so you're going to add that on to those elementary students' transportation. Yes.
Okay, that was my question. And I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Misty.
Mine's really quick, and this may be premature, but it is worth asking. Board members, is there an option that has been presented this evening that you favor or would rather see more so than another?
Misty, I guess I don't want to speak for the board per se, but we're pretty much where you are with this. And I'll tell you, I'm still reeling a little bit from some sticker shock myself. So I'm still processing. So I don't know what the other board members are, but I think we're just still processing the information is where we are.
Well, thank you for your answer. Apparently nobody else wants. I appreciate it.
I would agree with that. So we just heard all these options for the first time last night. So I need to pull up all those comparison charts with borrowing and millage increases and everything. So we'll definitely print out some hard copies and make a lot of notes. But yeah, it's going to take some processing time to even form an educated initial opinion, I think.
Okay.
I would like to comment, if I could.
Oh, go ahead.
Missy, I think I personally see the advantages of getting, let's say, all of the kindergarten, all of the first graders into the same building. And I believe all of the options kind of focused on making, that happen. So I, like Dave, don't have any particular option in mind. Certainly the lower cost options have to be a little more attractive to start, but it doesn't mean that those are the ones that are going to solve the educational programming issues as well. So I'm kind of listening certainly to your input, but also to what the administration has to say about the various options.
Thank you, Mr. Almer.
Misty, during the school board members' comments and questions after the public gets done tonight, you'll get a better idea on where I stand.
Okay, that sounds ominous, but I look forward to it. Really quickly, I know somebody had mentioned millage, and I'm just kind of curious as to, has anybody checked in with the borough here and Plunkett Township supervisors, that kind of thing, and maybe just checked in to see if, borough council is looking at an increase in taxes? Because it strikes me, if our townships also are looking at an increase, that the increase in millage from the school plus the increase in millage from our township really be tough for our homeowners.
Keep in mind also, I believe the county plans on having another increase.
I mean, and I understand that we have education and your sole focus is education, and I greatly appreciate that as we choose to live in McCordsville because of the education. However, I also understand that people need to be able to live and not just to work to pay taxes.
Misty, again, I think it's a little premature, like you said. We have not decided even on any options to know what we would be asking if they would be asking us questions. We don't have anything to really share with them at this point. I do not know the inner workings if they have a budget plan that goes on for a number of years, if they operate under those pretenses, or if it is a year-to-year assessment for them as well. So that is something that would have to be evaluated as we pare options down or change options. I would think that that would be very critical in asking those questions.
Thank you very much.
It's not.
Okay.
Mr.
My
Albert?
next hand. Oh,
I think Mr. Albert wanted to say something, but I'm not sure if he is able to with his technology.
I'm muted. I think Dan's going to get one of his kids to help. So let's let Daniel Asiello talk to us.
Okay, Daniel, you're up.
There was some conversation about capital and different amounts of capital being allocated per option. I saw one option there that there was 5 million in capital being allocated to it. So is there that flexibility of a possible of 5 million of capital being allocated to any of those options then? Or is it just to that one option? And I know loans can vary based on what you're doing and how money can be allocated from the state to what you're doing. So I was just kind of curious as far as how that went.
So we have 5 million currently in our capital account. That is the maximum. we could use. I would not recommend using all 5 million due to the fact that projects come up, buildings need roofs, pavement needs redone. Using all of that would put us in a poor situation in the future and may cause us to have larger tax increases because we would have to cover some of our capital maintenance stuff through our general fund budget.
And I think the reason that one option used the 5 million in capital was because the borrowing limits of the district would be exceeded if they weren't, if in that option, if the entire 5 million wasn't used.
You're correct, Scott.
Gotcha.
Sorry, I forgot that part. Our maximum borrowing is right at 25 million.
I thought, like, when I saw that 5 million allocated to the one option and I saw the price tag on the option originally, I thought that was going to be another one of those options that are out of the price range until I saw the 5 million in capital being allocated to it. So that's how you brought it in within price range. Although you wouldn't want to do that because you don't want to waste that money and put us into that predicament. So it's kind of, I don't know, I'm not sure why it got put up there if it's not really something that the district's willing to do anyways. Go ahead.
It's doable. I wouldn't recommend it, but the board does make the decision on what project we do. So I was just presenting the information that we have.
Awesome, thank you. And then with the renovations, does that include technology updates for the whatever option would be taken care of, whether it's lighter getting a big expansion put onto it or the middle school getting a big expansion put onto it? Would that include all the wireless stuff that needs to be taken care of, along with providing teachers the necessary equipment to teach effectively with the new updated technologies that we currently have?
So yes, the construction cost incorporates electrical data and infrastructure improvements of that nature. And then when we talk about the project soft costs of 16%, part of that would be in equipment and other furniture, fixtures, and equipment costs. And the district should they choose, could use that towards whatever loose kind of technology they choose to purchase for the project.
Where does the district currently get all of its broadband from? Is it coming from Blast, or is it coming from a private carrier, or where does all of that bandwidth come from right now?
Daniel, I can answer that, and we are in an agreement with Blast, and they're providing our internet service to all of our buildings.
Thank you. How long is that contract in place for?
It was a 10-year agreement when it was signed, and I believe that ends in 2027, if I remember correctly. And that's just the contract that we had signed. We can choose to renew it at that point.
Thank you. That's it for me at the moment.
Mr. Albert, if you want to say something, we saw that you were struggling before, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I got froze there. Nobody was moving, and obviously you couldn't hear me. I told you, Ron, 3 times. You can go ahead and speak. I'll wait. That's when we got interrupted. But anyway, this is like in the really early stages of this still, you know. And, you know, going back to what Misty was talking about, you know, as far as what our opinions are right now, it's, you know, not really, this isn't what this is about right now. It's about what their opinions are and getting all the information from them first before any of us should be really saying anything as a board at this point, because we, as of, you know, July 8th, we just got the information ourselves. So, you know, as we can just be patient and listen to what the public has to say, and then we can discuss, you know, at that point. But as of right now, we really don't really have a lot that we can offer till we get more information from the public. That's it.
Well, at this point, I'm not seeing any hands being raised, and so if the public would stick with us at this point, then if any of the board members just want to offer their thoughts on where they are at this point, and you know, we'll just let the board speak. And Ron, so go ahead. It's a good time, Ron. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Dave. First of all, I want to thank Daniel and Misty for all their questions. They were all great questions, and they're questions that needed to be answered. We've been showed 7 options. What I didn't see was an option to make improvements as we can afford them. We have $5 million in our capital projects fund. What I did see was a lot of manipulating numbers to push an agenda. The numbers that we were shown used anywhere from 0 to $5 million of the capital budget fund. My problem with that is we need to come up with a number we can use. And if we can use $4 million, then use $4 million to show those numbers on all options. I still stand firm that we need to do improvements as we can afford them. This district, in my opinion, cannot afford more debt at this time. That's all I have.
Sebastian, could you please let Daniel back in?
Yep, Daniel, you're up.
Ron, I appreciate the comment about having a standard amount of capital that's able to be used across all options in order to keep all options realistic to what we have to look at. That I do agree with. Obviously, the less capital that we can get away with using, the better if we're trying to keep a certain amount of money in there for upcoming repairs. But I want to voice concern that all children need to have a safe learning environment. And from what I can see and from what we've seen from previous presentations, Loyalsock Valley, I feel like, is in dire straits from how it's come across to me. And there's a lot more than $5 million of things to do, from air quality to temperature control to moisture control. It just seems like a huge undertaking to just Band-Aid something. And I get it, like, I'm a taxpayer, I don't want any more debt than the next person. But at the same time, I have 3 kids in the district, and one of them's not even in school yet. He's only 3 and will be coming through the Montoursville School District once he's 5 for the following 13 years. And I want them to have a safe, clean learning environment to be in. And sometimes that costs money. And sometimes you do have, we do have to build new, we have to make fresh. And there's a lot of tough decisions. And I don't think any decision that's made by anybody is going to make everybody happy. It's impossible to make everybody happy. But if we can make everybody safe and have a positive learning environment and a comfortable learning environment, I think at least we've succeeded at that level. That's all. Thank you.
Brandy.
Okay.
Brandy? Is Brandy with us?
Can you hear me, Mr. Albert?
Yes. when you discuss and talk about option 3, 4, and 7, and you talk about the savings that the district will be having, is that going to be an annual thing as far as just as far as administration and teachers and utilities? Are those things going to be a savings of that range of money per year?
Yes, so the personnel and stuff has to do with consolidating to one building and being able to have a more balanced class size. So, and some of it has to do with duplicate services in the buildings where we're able to not need those duplicate services anymore. And the utilities primarily come from the closure of the building, but still maintaining a percentage of that, because until the board decides what will be done, we don't, we still have to pay the electric. We still have to, pay those bills to make sure the building stays in good quality. So that has that all figured into it. Plus it also has some expenditures figured in for the addition at Lighter. It's probably those utilities are going to cost us a little bit more because it's going to be a bigger size building. So I have that information all factored into it. And if I could, I just want to comment on the millage studies. Those were done prior to us getting these numbers last week for the projects, and due to vacations and stuff, and these millage studies aren't done specifically for each project. I was waiting to have that before when we narrowed it down so we can focus on just a couple and what it would do if we used different amounts of capital and how that would work within our tax increase that we wanted to get for the project. So I just wanted to address that. It wasn't anything intentional. It's just these were done prior to us receiving this information. This was actually something I had started working on over a month ago. So that's why we don't have the exact amounts for each project for the same capital. As we narrow it, we will start working with RBC and have them come in and present that information to the board.
Thank you.
Randy, are you able to recrunch some of those numbers based on just I don't want to say arbitrary, but let's say we say, $2.5 million of capital reserve into any one of the projects. Obviously the one needs 5 million or it's off the boards, and I think we think it probably is anyway. But so if you just standardized on that, can you crunch numbers? Do you have a spreadsheet to let you do that, or is this older information you can't do that?
No, I don't actually have the spreadsheet that does that. I work with RBC Capital Market, and they perform all the analysts using, current market data, and they actually provide them to me on a PDF.
Okay, all right.
Scott, I have a question for you. And this was, do you have the last presentation handy where you can look at it?
I can pull it up digitally.
I'd like to know, since I don't have it in front of me, what year the last renovation was done at Loyalsock Valley and what year the last renovation was done at Lighter.
Sure, I can pull that up. So Loyalsock Valley was last, they did additions and alterations in 1983. And Lighter in 1998.
The reason why I asked that was because you say that later that the infrastructure is at its end of its useful life, yet Loyalsock Valley has been at the end of its useful life since who knows when.
Right. Yeah, and
because a lot of the last time it was renovated, the electrical wasn't updated. The heating along the walls wasn't updated. So we're talking a lot of years that Loyalsock Valley has, its infrastructure has been still being used, even though you're saying at 20 years, it's at the end of its useful life. I think the focus needs to be on the Loyalsock Valley School, in a time that this district can't afford debt, but we have a school that needs upgrades to it. We need to do the upgrades as we can afford it to the Loyalsock Valley, and let the upgrades at later go at least half as many years as they went at Loyalsock Valley.
yeah, and Mr. Snell, so if you, a good comparison would be if you look at the cost to upgrade spreadsheet. When we say end of its useful life at lighter, it's not all the systems, it's certain systems there. When we looked at Loyalsock Valley and the things that were at the end of their useful life and the cost to upgrade those, that was a far more extensive list than lighter. I think the major cost at lighter, if you recall, wasn't necessarily the HVAC system didn't need replaced. It was more that was in good working condition and had more serviceable life on it. It was adding air conditioning that was the biggest cost there. So there were some things like the water heater and the pumps, and some carpet and things like that. But the majority of what we said at lighter that was in need of comprehensive renovation or upgrade were more minor in comparison to Loyalsock Valley. So I think a good place to look at that is in those cost to upgrade spreadsheets that we prepared as part of that first part of the study.
The other thing I'd like to bring up is school, the sizes of our district is going down. PDE says it's going down. What you looked at says enrollment is decreasing. You added a bus loop at Loyalsock Valley and more hard surface play area at Loyalsock Valley. That's added cost that doesn't necessarily need to be done with decreasing enrollment.
Yeah, and that's something that the district could choose to take on or not. It was really in reaction to a couple of comments as we did our initial study. One was a safety factor. When you have the combination of parents and buses in the same area, it gets to be a lot of congestion and traffic, and the district made comments. Actually, there's been a couple near misses with students getting hit. So that's more of a safety aspect. Doesn't really have much to do with enrollment. So that's something that you could choose to do or not choose to do. And then the hard surface play area was more of a comment from the administration on the congestion they get out there with their current enrollment, not looking at any future enrollment and not looking at increasing it because of future enrollment, but just because of the status of the current enrollment and the number of students that they try to fit out there currently. But certainly, I always say there's two ways to do a project. You could say, let's address everything and what does that cost, or you could say let's spend this and what can we get for that. So obviously you have those options to make, selections to make as options.
Okay, thank you.
As far as if I can piggyback, Scott, on that safety item, my previous tenure on another board, and it wasn't during my tenure on the other board, but in that district, we had a child killed on a bus ramp, run over by a bus. So this segregation of cars and buses, that's a big deal to me. And I'm all in on that. So whatever we do, I'm all in on that safety feature for sure. Sebastian, we have some hands again.
Yep, I was just going to say, I do see some hands up, so I'm going to go back to public comment here, and I will start with Daniel.
Thanks again, Sebastian, and everyone else. Question, Brandy. That $5 million cap that is available, or the capital that's available, is that what's available now, or what's projected to be available when the decision of construction would have to start in order to spend whatever capital the school board decides to spend?
We have right around 5 million in our capital account right now.
Okay, so that could change, especially with how things are with COVID right now and the extra expenditures that districts are incurring. And if we have to alter busing and the whole social distancing piece with busing and PPE for teachers and students, or is that something that the state's going to be helping with?
So capital is restricted. So it can only be used for certain items. And the items that you are listing there are items that are not eligible. So it has to be items that are, okay, so just give you, it's basically items that will be depreciated over time. So it's not like your supplies and stuff that you have to have every year. It's stuff that occurs infrequently. So it's your roofs, your blacktop, replacing fencing, vehicles, items like that.
Yeah, I completely understand. I understand depreciation
Okay.
and what can and all of that good jazz. So I appreciate that clarity on there. My other comment is with useful life of buildings and whatnot. Like I believe from the last meeting I attended, there was like a 10-year period of useful life and whatnot with certain aspects of the building and what would need to be updated and whatnot. And granted, Loyalsock Valley hasn't been updated for 37 years, which in my view, to do that to kids anyway, like to do that in general to students, having to live in that building for 180 days a year, to me is a hard pill to swallow. But at the same time, we all need to look forward at how do we get all students in this district now, or all children in this district now, to have that better learning environment, the environment where there's clean air in their rooms, where there's air conditioning in the summer. Like my 8-year-old at home is dreading having to wear a mask at school, especially in a room that's not air conditioned even. Like I know how it is if I'm out working and doing things with a mask. Like it's not an easy task. Especially, I can't even imagine a 5-year-old coming in and having to wear a mask all day, especially in an environment where there is no air conditioning, nor the air being really that clean. You might pass some inspections here and there, but I mean, really, that's such a huge piece. And I don't know, it's just a big concern of mine. Like, we just need to make sure whatever decision made going forward, that every single student has that access to a clean, safe environment for whichever room they're in, and that their numbers aren't 22 kids in a room or 21 kids in a room. Like if there's any way that we can reduce that. I'd be curious too, sorry if I'm going on a little mental tangent here, as to what the square footage is of the classrooms in general, and does it allow for 6 feet of space? Granted, we're going out a year, but honestly, like I don't see some of these sicknesses going away anytime soon. Currently, part of our country is in shambles and getting worse and worse. I want to make sure that when we do look at these things that we're projecting out to be able to handle, any pandemics or anything that would require what we're being required of now from PDE? That's my thoughts.
Daniel, thank you very much for those thoughts, because we are also thinking the same thing in line with the pandemics. However, I believe, and Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong because I've been out of that business manager side for a while now, but the state tells you what you can build and what they will fund. If you want to expand on what it is that you wish to have for your district, say you want to have a larger cafeteria or a gymnasium, and the state disagrees with that based on your enrollment, they will not fund those pieces. So it would then be up to the district and the local citizens to determine if that is something that is specifically requested in a project that they would have to fund that. And Scott, please correct anything that I have just said.
It's similar to that concept. So reimbursement is based on capacity. So if you were to design and I think I talked about this before, but so regardless of whether you do, 2,000 square feet of additions or 5,000 square feet of additions, the reimbursement is going to be similar in nature, in that it's based on the number of students in your building combined with your aid ratio and some other complex equations. But essentially what the space is talking about, there's a formula that basically says, here's what your current enrollment is, or your highest projected enrollment plus 10%. That's what PD is going to use as a baseline for their reimbursement formula. If you have additional classrooms and additional capacity space, you're going to put your FTE or your capacity of students higher, then they're going to prorate that. So you're not going to get full reimbursement capacity if you build a larger building than what you need. And that deals with reimbursable space. There's also a check to make sure you don't go above what they call the Taj Mahal Act, or a certain size of building to make sure districts aren't building more than what they need. But and then I want to circle back to another comment. I know you made a comment about the 21 students, and that was just kind of taking the math. If you would take the whole grade population K-4 and divide it amongst the 32 classrooms. However, you don't get the benefit of seeing kind of the options and how they laid out here with the number of classrooms. So the majority of the consolidated options were showing 7 kindergarten classrooms per grade, which kind of closely aligns with what you currently have. And when you factor that into your current enrollment at kindergarten of 126 students, that's 18 students per grade. So there has been, and I think there will remain a desire on the district, as it is with most districts in the state, to keep those lower grade levels at a lower capacity, so that you do have that better one-on-one and attention span for those students. So
thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Okay, going to you, Misty.
Hi guys. So I'm sitting here and I'm listening to all of this, and my comments truly are based more towards Mr. Snell. So from what I'm hearing from him is that because previous districts or previous boards, didn't put the effort into replacing the valley and fixing things at the valley as they needed to, that now we should let later fall to the wayside, and then 5, 10, 15 years down the line, we're looking at a similar situation with lighter. Am I not hearing you correctly?
That couldn't be further from the truth. I believe that we need to protect every student in our district. The point I was trying to make was lighter is only 22 years into or from a last renovation. Loyal Sock Valley is 37 years. the staff, the kids at the Valley need the upgrades, and they're the ones that need the upgrades the most. I'm not saying that Leiter doesn't need upgrades, but I'm saying that the Valley needs them the most. They have the most deficiencies. It was proven in 3 studies now that the Valley needed the most upgrades. It's time we do those upgrades at the Valley. If we can't afford to do them at both schools, we need to at least do them at the Valley.
So then what happens to the things that need to be done at Leiter? And what happens to those students at Leiter? Because as far as I'm concerned, my child, whether she goes to Leiter or the Valley, should be getting the same education.
And they are getting the same education. The thing about what the money for the Leiter is, it's infrastructure. It's upgrading or replacing infrastructure where an architect says in 20 years it's reaching its life, the end of its life. We're going on 37 plus years at the Valley where the infrastructure has been way past the end of its life. The infrastructure doesn't have the big effect on the education of the students. The teachers that we have educate our students, and they do a damn good job of it.
I absolutely agree with you, but when to piggyback on what Dan said, when the kids are in the building wearing masks and the kids at the Valley have air conditioning, because yes, I will wholeheartedly agree with you that the Valley needs to be a priority. My entire point though is that just because the Valley needs to be a priority doesn't mean that Leiter should fall to the wayside. So when the kids out of the Valley have to wear their masks, which that's the world we live in right now, and that's understandable, and they get to do so in air conditioning, as opposed to the 500 kids that are down here at Leiter sweating to death because we weren't a priority. Because I hear all the words that you're saying, Mr. Snell. I really do, and I agree with you that the Valley needs some help. But in the same breath, what I'm hearing from you is the kids at Leiter aren't a priority.
No, I'm not saying the kids at the Valley are a priority. I'm saying the school at the Valley is the priority.
Okay. And maybe it's Zoom, maybe it's me not seeing all of the reports, and okay. And as far as what Mr. Schimmel said about the bus loop, I've been to drop off with buses coming through. If there's a place where we want to pinch pennies, the bus loop is not it. And I will fight tooth and nail for that.
I just want to say, Misty, that I do appreciate hearing your opinions. I wish more people would speak up with their opinions. We don't have to agree all the time, because the more input we get, the more we'll better be able to make a decision.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I appreciate the time that you spend on the board. I know it's not an easy position.
Okay, thank you, Misty. I'm going to once again allow Daniel to speak.
Thank you. Just going off of what was just, it sounds like everyone wants the best learning environment for the students from Montoursville. It seems to me like it's a big question of where does this take place? Is it in a place where we renovate 2 buildings, or is it in a place where we consolidate and really ramp up and make one building really, really awesome for all kids. Like, that's what I'm hearing. Like, I think everyone has their full heart into this and has spent a lot of time contemplating and thinking about really what's best for the Montoursville community. That's all. I just wanted to chime in with that.
I just want to make one other statement that people need to keep in mind that the tax increases that we've been seeing over the last 12 to 15 years, most of them are amounting to 0.35 up to, I believe it was 0.53. So when you add more tax increases on top of that, to cover, on top of what you're going to have to cover operating costs, because evidently the operating costs aren't going to decrease anytime soon, because they haven't over the last 12 to 15 years. You're talking a big increase every year for 5 years. You're talking the increase to support the education, and you're talking an increase to support the debt. And during uncertain times like we're in right now, the cost for the education could possibly skyrocket, and the money coming from taxpayers could possibly be decreasing due to people losing their jobs and not being able to afford their taxes.
At this point, I'm not seeing any more hands raised, and I don't know if any board members wish to offer maybe any closing thoughts, if that's what this will be. So we appreciate the questions and the conversations with, especially a couple of the folks, and I don't see that as you dominating the conversation. You ask such great questions. You make us think, and you give us perspective that we really need. And so I suspect you may have asked a lot of questions that a lot of people were thinking too, and you took care of business for them. So I guess we'll give you some appreciation for that. So board, if there's nothing else from you in closing, Christina, anything in closing?
Just that the same meeting will occur next Wednesday at 7 p.m., July the 22nd. So everyone is welcome to, again, join us and bring a friend. And we will go through the same exact presentation so that we have this out. It will also, and I do believe, Sebastian, you've already placed this on our website so that it can be shared and anyone has the ability to review it at their leisure.
Christine, I have a question. When that's shared, is public comment also shared?
It's the presentation that's shared, and then the comments would be part of that permanent record on YouTube, yes.
Okay, when will we be getting this on YouTube?
You can get that at any time once it's posted by going to the website, and it's up on that little right-hand corner. It says YouTube, and when you click into that, you'll be able to see the the presentation.
I absolutely know that. What I'm asking is, when will this be put on YouTube?
Sebastian?
That I don't have an idea on. Usually it usually takes a day.
The reason why I asked is because the board meeting last night hasn't been put on yet, and Sebastian said that sometimes YouTube, when Dan tries to put it on, there's a hold up because it's so big. And I was curious, if, you know, when people ask me if I can give them some kind of time frame.
Hi, Ron. Yeah, I'll just kind of repeat what I sent to you in my email, and that is after these meetings, that Zoom has to process it, so that can usually take a little bit of time. Typically, I'll wake up in the morning to an email saying that your video has been processed, at which time I'll pass it off to Dan. He's always very busy, but I know he works very hard to get it up there, and it does take a little bit of time to get that posted as well. So as Christina said, it usually takes about a day. Sometimes it can take as many as 3 days or so, but we'll get it up there as quickly as we can.
Okay, I'm just asking because people ask me, because a lot of times they go on YouTube the following day and then contact me and say, isn't it going to be put on? And that's why I've got in touch with you in the past to ask a time frame.
Okay, with that then, board, unless you have anything else, then your last chance here to offer something. Otherwise, Sebastian, if you want to, it's 9:21. If you want to close this meeting out, and again, thank you to the public that stuck with us and all the questions, and appreciate Scott and Sean. Thanks for coming out as well and helping us out. So good night, folks.